My husband mentioned over coffee one Tuesday morning that his colleague thought he was settling. He said it the way someone might mention bad weather on the commute. Offhand, not even looking up from his phone. He was standing at our kitchen island in his suit, and the words came out like they cost him nothing. "Prue said that?" I asked. "She didn't mean it harshly." He finally set down his phone and looked at me. "She just said you seem like someone who's comfortable. Like you peaked early and made peace with it. And she asked if I'd really thought about what I want in a partner long term." He paused. "She made some fair points." I looked at him across the island. The kitchen I had paid to renovate 14 months ago, in the condo I had bought 3 years before that. My name was the only one on the deed. The down payment had come from my business account. I had wired it on a Tuesday afternoon, not unlike this one, while Asher was in a deposition and I had exactly 20 minutes between calls. I thought about all of that, briefly. Then I said, "That's interesting." He blinked. "That's your response? What would you like me to say?" He opened his mouth, closed it, picked up his coffee. I think he expected tears. I think he expected an argument, something he could navigate around or dismiss. I gave him neither. I finished my breakfast, told him to have a good day, and waited until I heard the elevator close, before I opened my laptop and pulled up the lease agreement for 221 North Wacker Drive. His firm occupied the entire 7th floor, had for 4 years. I stared at that document for a long time. Let me be clear about something. I am not someone who plans revenge. That's the word people use when they tell this story now, but it's not accurate. What I did was stop hiding. Those are different things, even when the outcome looks similar from the outside. My name is Isla Voss, I'm 32. For the past 6 years, I have been quietly building a commercial real estate portfolio in Chicago that, as of last fall, carried a net asset value of $14.2 million. I started with a warehouse in Pilsen in 2019, 4,200 square feet, a failing roof, and electrical wiring the inspector described as inventive. I bought it for $280,000, every dollar saved from 3 years of working as a property manager for a downtown real estate group. I spent 7 months and $138,000 getting it into shape, then signed a ceramic studio to the ground floor on a 5-year lease. My first full year, I netted just under $90,000. I remember sitting at my kitchen table the night the first wire transfer cleared, looking at the number, feeling something I didn't have a word for at the time. Later I understood it was simply being exactly who I had always planned to be. By the time Asher and I got married, I owned 3 properties. By the time he relayed Prue's assessment over coffee, I owned 9. My business partner is Serena Cho. We met at a real estate investment seminar in 2018. We were the 2 youngest people in the room and the only 2 women, and spent the next 3 hours at a bar on Randolph Street, sketching out a business plan on cocktail napkins. She handles the financing side, loan structures, investor relations, the projections that make our accountant look briefly ill before he realizes they're accurate. I handle acquisitions, renovations, and tenant negotiations. We operate as VCH Properties, LLC. We don't advertise. Our name circulates among commercial real estate people who care more about performance than profile. Asher knew I worked in real estate. That was always true. What he didn't know, what I had never corrected him on, was the scope. When he pictured my day, I think he imagined apartment showings or chasing maintenance requests. Something small scale, supportive of people doing bigger things. He asked about my work the way you ask a friend about a hobby, politely, briefly, not really waiting for the full answer. His work, on the other hand, was constant. I went to every firm event for 6 years, learned every partner's name and practice area, stood at cocktail hours making conversation about corporate litigation and merger timelines, and when Asher introduced me, my wife Isla, she does some property stuff, I smiled and steered the conversation toward whatever anyone else wanted to discuss. I remember once, at the firm's holiday party 2 years into our marriage, one of the senior partners had asked what I did. "Property management," I said, technically accurate and deeply incomplete. He nodded, said something polite about Chicago real estate being competitive, and turned to ask Asher about a case he'd heard about. I stood there holding my wine glass, thinking about the Pilsen warehouse and the 2 other properties I had under letter of intent, and I said nothing. I told myself I was being a good partner. I told myself letting Asher be the impressive one was what love looked like in practice. I had convinced myself that invisibility was a form of generosity. It took a long time to understand that it was neither. After the Tuesday morning conversation, something in me quietly reorganized. I didn't fight with Asher about Prue's comment. I didn't bring it up again. I just started seeing our life more clearly. The financial reality of our household. The shape of all the support I had been providing without naming it. The fact that he had been walking through a life largely funded by me, without ever once asking how. I pulled out our bank records and sat down with them properly for the first time. The condo down payment, $340,000 wired from my business account. The kitchen renovation, $87,000 covered by quarterly revenue. The 18 months when Asher's firm restructured and cut his billable hours. I had been quietly transferring $200 a month into our joint account to cover the shortfall. He thought the gap was somehow working itself out. It was. I had been working it out without being asked, without mentioning it. The bar prep course he needed after his first attempt, $2,400 on my card. 2 of the tailored suits he wore to depositions, the ones that photographed well and made him look like someone who had always had money. I had bought them both. He thought his end-of-year bonus had covered them. The timeline didn't actually work that way, but I had never corrected him. I laid all of it out in a spreadsheet that Serena later told me was the most organized grief she had ever seen. Then I called Serena. She was at our Fulton Market office when I arrived. She took one look at me and put down her coffee. "Tell me everything," she said. When I finished, she was quiet for a moment. Then, "Does he know we own his building?" "No." "Does he know what VCH billed last year?" "No." "What does he think you do?" "Property stuff," I said, quoting exactly. She went to the conference room whiteboard and wrote in large letters, 142M, drew a circle around it. "That is what we built," she said, "and he doesn't know. He never asked." She capped the marker. "Why didn't you tell him?" I had thought about this more times than I could count. The honest answer was uncomfortable. Asher had come into our marriage with a lot of pride wrapped up in being the provider, the one with the trajectory. In the early years, he was grinding, associate hours, low pay for someone with his level of debt, always slightly behind the people who had gone to better schools or come from money. Every time I thought about being fully honest, I imagined what it would do to how he saw himself, and I backed down. "I thought I was protecting him," I said. Serena sat down. "You were enabling him. You made yourself smaller so he could feel bigger. And now he's standing in a condo you bought, telling you a woman at his office thinks you peaked early." She wasn't wrong. I had known she wasn't wrong for longer than I'd admitted. That was when I decided about the party. 221 North Wacker's lease was up for renewal in March. Hartley and Breck had been our tenant for 4 years, and their office manager was in early talks with our property management team about terms. Standard VCH practice for a renewal of this size was to send a principal to any goodwill event and open the relationship conversation in person. Serena usually went to these things. That year, I called their office manager myself and confirmed I'd be attending the firm's December holiday event. I asked for discretion around the arrangements, explaining that I preferred to let conversations develop naturally before introductions were made. I did not tell Asher. When he mentioned the party to me the week before, "Work thing, probably boring, I didn't need to come," I said I had other plans. He looked, briefly, relieved, and that was the end of it. The party was in an event space on Michigan Avenue, floor-to-ceiling windows facing the lake, string lights, a jazz quartet working through something unhurried in the corner. The kind of event that says successful firm without anyone having to announce it. I arrived at 7:15 and found James Hartley near the bar within minutes. He was the founding partner, 60, silver-haired, the kind of man who makes every room feel slightly more organized simply by being present in it. He shook my hand with genuine warmth. "Mrs. Voss, we've been looking forward to meeting you properly. VCH has been a genuinely excellent landlord." We talked through the renewal for nearly 20 minutes. Square footage, proposed rate adjustments, the common area improvements I was planning for spring. He raised the possibility of an 8th floor expansion. Our headcount has grown more than we projected, he said. If the terms work, we'd want to discuss a long-term commitment. Let's set up a proper sit-down in January, I said. I think we can make it work. I was mid-thought about lobby renovation timelines when I saw my husband come through the door. He came in with 2 colleagues, loosening his tie, laughing at something said in the elevator. He scanned the room the way people do at these events: drink station, familiar faces, where to position himself, and then his eyes found me. He stopped, not a pause, a full stop. His face moved through several things in rapid succession: confusion, disbelief, and then something I had never quite seen on him before. Something that looked like the floor tilting. James Hartley followed my gaze. Do you know some of our associates? 1 or 2, I said. Asher crossed the room slowly, the way a person moves when they're not sure what they're walking toward. He stopped a few feet from our small circle, looking between me and the senior partner, with the expression of someone who has arrived mid-conversation and suspects he is the subject of it. Asher. James Hartley spoke with the effortless authority of someone who has been managing rooms for 30 years. Do you know Ms. Voss? She owns the building. The sentence landed. Asher's mouth opened, nothing came out. We've met, I said pleasantly. It's good to see you. I gave him 20 minutes. He spent most of them at the edge of the room with a drink he didn't touch, watching me talk with the partners. I could feel the weight of his attention from across the space, but I kept my focus on the conversations in front of me. 8th floor expansion. Lease structure, parking. When I saw a natural pause, I walked toward him. We need to talk, he said immediately low. We are talking. Isla. He angled us slightly away from the nearest cluster of people. You own this building. VCH Properties does. I'm one of 2 principals. You never. How long has this? We acquired it 4 years ago. You'd already been a tenant for a year when we bought it. He then slowly. The condo. My name is on the deed. The down payment. Business account. When the firm cut my hours last year, the money that was just there in the joint account every month, I was transferring it, I said, so you wouldn't have to worry. Isla. You never asked. The words came out level without heat, which somehow made them heavier than anger would have. In 6 years of marriage, you never sat down and asked what I was building, what I cared about, what I was proud of. You introduced me at every one of these events as your wife who does some property stuff. Said it like a footnote. And I let you, because I thought making you the impressive one was what a good partner did. I paused. I was wrong about that. He didn't answer. I reached for my phone, pulled up the VCH portfolio summary, the one we used for investor presentations, and held the screen toward him. Clean charts, property addresses, appraised values, revenue figures by year going back to 2019. This is what I've been building, I said, while you were telling people I do some property stuff. He looked at the screen for a long time. I watched him process the numbers, the actual numbers, laid out in the clean language of a professional financial document, and I watched his understanding of the last 6 years rewrite itself in real time across his face. Then James Hartley appeared at my elbow with the impeccable timing of someone who has navigated difficult moments for decades, and I went with him to meet the firm's COO. I did not look back. I drove home at 10:30, sat in the parking garage for a few minutes before going inside, not quite ready to close the evening. December cold pressed against the car windows. The city hummed around it. Serena had texted, "How did it go?" I replied, "James Hartley wants to talk about the 8th floor. 3 seconds. And the other thing? He knows now. Good." I went upstairs. Asher wasn't home. I made tea and sat at the kitchen island in the dark, waiting for the feeling I expected. Relief, maybe. Or the ache of something ending. What I felt instead was quiet. The kind of quiet that comes after a long exhale. When you finally put down something heavy you'd stopped noticing you were carrying. My phone rang at 2:48 in the morning. Unknown number, Chicago area code. Something made me answer. Is this Isla? A woman's voice, tightly wound, like someone who had spent hours talking herself out of making this call and finally lost the argument. Yes. This is Prue, from Asher's firm. I sat up. I know who you are. I'm sorry to call this late. A breath, After you left tonight, some of us started looking up VCH properties, the filings, the acquisition records, and I had to call. Another pause, steadying herself. A few weeks ago I said something to Asher about you. I told him I thought he was settling, that you seemed comfortable but not driven. I made a judgment about your life and your ambitions, and I had never talked to you for more than 10 minutes total in my life. He told me, I said. I know. He told all of us. Her voice cracked slightly. I looked at what you've built, Isla, and I just needed you to know that I'm sorry. I decided who you were without knowing anything real about you. And then I handed my assumptions to your husband like they were facts. I thought about every party where I had been a footnote, every introduction that ended with, she does some property stuff. You weren't working with full information, I said. That's not an excuse. No, I agreed, it's not, but I appreciate that you called. A silence, then carefully, is there any way this can be repaired with Asher? Prue, I kept my voice calm. Some things that break were already broken, you just handed someone the language for it. A pause. Don't call me again. I set the phone down and sat with the quiet for a while. I thought about the version of me at the beginning of that marriage. Proud of what I was building but afraid of what honesty might cost. Choosing invisibility over disclosure because I had convinced myself invisibility was kinder. I had built a $14 million portfolio in careful silence because I was afraid that being exactly who I was would diminish someone I loved. It had taken a Tuesday morning conversation about peaking early for me to finally understand that had never been mine to manage. Asher and I separated in January. He retained an attorney. I retained one as well. A woman Serena recommended with 6 words, she's thorough and she's fair. The process was not short, but it was honest. The condo was mine, purchased before the marriage with separate funds, documented cleanly. The business was mine, capitalized entirely with premarital capital, and operated independently throughout. What Asher received was a fair settlement, and whatever private accounting he needed to do about the years he had spent, not looking closely enough at the life around him. I don't carry bitterness about it. I want to be honest about that. I think he is a person who never had to examine his assumptions because the world, and I especially, had always arranged itself around them. That's a failure of mine as much as his. I let it go on for 6 years. I kept the architecture of that comfortable fiction standing, because I was afraid of what would happen when it came down. Now I know. What happens is you get your life back. VCH Properties announced a new acquisition in February. A Class B office building in the South Loop that Serena had been watching for 8 months. It was the largest deal we had ever closed. For the first time, we put both our names on the press release. It ran in Crane's Chicago business on a Thursday. By Friday, my phone had more messages than I knew what to do with. Former clients, new investor inquiries, a journalist requesting a profile, an editor at a women's business publication who said our story was exactly what the moment calls for. I said yes to the profile. I said yes to a speaking invitation at the Chicago Real Estate Summit in March. 700 people in a ballroom at the Marriott Marquis downtown. I stood at the lectern under the lights and talked about building in the background. About the years I spent operating under a name that meant nothing to anyone who didn't know what to look for. About the discipline it takes to grow something in quiet, and about the cost of that quiet. Not the financial cost. The other kind, the way smallness becomes a habit and then a posture and then, eventually, a fact you start to believe about yourself. Afterward, a young woman approached me. She was maybe 23, holding a notebook she clearly hadn't opened. I'm trying to get into commercial real estate, she said. My boyfriend keeps telling me I should focus on his startup instead of building my own thing. He says 2 people building at the same time creates too much competition in a relationship. I looked at her. Does being with him make you feel like you can grow? I asked. Or does it make you feel like you have to stay in place? She considered it seriously. The second one, she said. Then you already know what to do. She nodded, wrote something in her notebook. I didn't see what it was. I hope it was the part that mattered. On a Wednesday evening in late spring, I stood in the lobby of 221 North Wacker and watched the sun go down through the west-facing windows. The building smelled like renovation, fresh concrete, new paint, the particular optimism of a space becoming what it was always supposed to be. Serena had texted earlier, 8th floor framing was ahead of schedule. Hartley and Breck would take occupancy in July. I stayed until the lobby went dim and the evening cleaning crew began their rounds. Then I walked out into the May air. Chicago in spring is a city that has remembered itself. The air off the lake was cool but forgiving, and the streets were full of people who had finally stopped bracing for cold. I walked the 2 blocks to the parking structure without hurrying. Somewhere between the building and my car, I thought about the Tuesday morning that started all of this. The coffee. The casual certainty delivered across a kitchen island. The word settling, said like it barely mattered. It had mattered, more than I showed at the time. But what I had built did not disappear, because someone said the wrong thing about me at 8 in the morning. It was there in the deed and the lease agreements and the quarterly reports. A record that told a very different story than the one being told about me over coffee. The work had always been real. I had just finally stopped making it easy to overlook. And that, more than any acquisition figure or press mention or lease renewal, was the thing worth keeping, the decision to take up exactly as much space as I had earned, and not 1 square foot less.